We're recording now, so welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this is our fourth workshop for the Writing Center. My name is Tom, and I'm here to talk to you all today about brainstorming and generating ideas. So we're going to jump right into it. So the first step in any assignment that you have, after you read and understand the assignment, is to generate ideas. So there are many methods for generating ideas. Those include clustering, brainstorming, and listing, which we're going to talk about today, all three of these ideas. So here's a sample assignment that you might get in a class, and that's to describe a place. So we'll read through this, and as I'm reading this out loud, you guys who are participating, I want you to, maybe if you've got like a notepad handy, go ahead and write down, if this was your assignment, write down any words that jump out at you as important, something that you would want to pay attention to so that you could do this assignment successfully. Describe a place in micro detail in at least 1,000 words and establish a clear dominant impression of this location. The relationship between the writer as eyewitness and the subject, in this case your subject is a place, should be made clear by exploring the subjective, personal, emotional effect that is produced by visiting your location. Adhere to the conventions of essay formatting. I'll put these on the overhead. A title is not required, but you may include one if you wish. I suggest you do not explicitly identify by name the place you're describing in your first paragraph. Instead, let your selection and the presentation of details reveal the location as the piece progresses. This is more likely to hook the reader. Okay, so imagine this was your assignment in your class. You're being asked to just describe a place. What words in this description of the task, what words jump out at you as maybe really important details to remember as you write your assignment, or to make sure you understand as you write it? Any suggestions?
The personal and emotional effects.
Good, yeah. This one right here, the subjective, personal, emotional effect. Great. Others? So that's a good place to start. So we would want to focus a lot of our attention, or maybe we would think the goal of this assignment is to do more than just describe the objective reality of what's going on in that place, but then to get into some subjective details about it. Well, here are some examples, or here are some of the words that I picked out here that we would want to maybe pay attention to. I've highlighted them. So definitely the subjective, personal, emotional effect. Also here in the first line, notice micro detail. That's different from detail, right? How is micro detail different from detail?
Does it mean like the smaller details?
Yeah.
Larger?
Great, yeah, exactly. So we're talking about the nitty-gritty details here, right? So I've got already, just looking at this assignment description up close, I'm already kind of got some different things to juggle and think about. I need to describe the physical, objective, real place, and I need to do it in micro detail, right? And at the same time, I need to describe it in such a way that my subjective, personal, emotional experience is being relayed. I noted here 1,000 words, so it's good to keep in mind as I'm brainstorming for my assignment, choosing my topic, to think about how long is this assignment going to be. If it was only going to be 300 words, or if it was going to be 3,000 words, that might change my options for what I could choose to write this on. And then lastly, I selected clear dominant impression, because at the same time as we're describing micro detail and subjective, personal, emotional effect, it sounds pretty clear that we want a clear dominant impression. We don't want maybe like a whole lot of random things piled in on top of each other. So we don't want to be going off on different tangents. We want like a consistent theme or a singular kind of idea being expressed through this assignment. So, okay, so we're just getting started. We understand the assignment. We haven't started writing it yet. And we've got to pick our topic, right? So we have the freedom in this assignment to choose any place that we want to describe. So the first technique we're going to use is called clustering. And you've probably seen this before, or maybe used it in like an English class previously. So we use clustering to help us narrow our focus. So if we have a topic and it's maybe too broad, we can use clustering to focus down in a little more detail. It also helps us to identify details. So I've got written up here the keywords that jumped out from that assignment. And so let's say the first place that I thought of when I read that assignment sheet was I thought, okay, I'm going to write about Grace Harbor County. Well, Grace Harbor County, that sounds good for 1,000 words. You could write 1,000 words about Grace Harbor County pretty easily. But let me ask you, do you think you could write micro detail about Grace Harbor County?
Yes.
Okay, and do you think that you could write micro detail about Grace Harbor County within 1,000 words?
No.
That's right. So we could, but if I was going to go into micro detail about everything in the county, gosh, I'd be writing a whole encyclopedia, right? There would be too much information to provide. So I need to narrow my choices down a little bit more. So I might start to go to the next level down. So what's more focused than a county? Well, I might maybe pick out some cities or other locations. And so I might think, okay, well, here's maybe some 3 different spots that I've been to, or 3 different cities that I have experiences in. But which ones of those would I want to focus on? And again, I could write 1,000 words about Aberdeen, or 1,000 words about Montesano, or about Ocean Shores, but it still may not be in micro detail. If I wrote about 10 places in Aberdeen for 1,000 words, each one of those would only be 100 words. 100 words isn't really a lot to give micro detail about a place. So I need to go one level deeper, right? I need to pick out even more specific locations. So from here, I might go and do some more clustering. So within Aberdeen, I could think of, well, there's the Bishop Center, there's the Aberdeen Arts Center, there's the shops at Riverside, the mall. When I think about Montesano, I might think of the county courthouse, Lake Sylvia, the Beehive Restaurant. Right, and Ocean Shores, I might think of the jetty, I might think of the Weatherwax Trail, or the boathouse. So I've got lots of things that I'm thinking about that I could choose as my topic. But now I've worked it down to a level that's more narrow, more focused, and at this point, I could choose a topic that I could write 1,000 words of micro detail on. I could write about Lake Sylvia in micro detail, and I could get to 1,000 words and have a good solid paper on that. So you can use the clustering to help you narrow your focus in this way, right? If you start too broad, or sometimes you might get feedback from your instructor on your on maybe like your thesis or something, and they might say, oh, you want to write about let's say about equal rights between genders. So then you might say, okay, well, that's a really broad topic, and your instructor might say you need to focus that and get more into detail. Clustering is a great next step for figuring out what that topic's going to be. So from this point, you could also use clustering to help you identify details. So I could start with a new sheet of paper, and I could write Lake Sylvia in the center of it, and then I could start branching off, right, and start identifying more details based on that. So as you're working on your assignments today, I'm going to give you guys a chance in a moment to use some of these techniques. And so we might be using clustering for some of those. So clustering is one of our techniques. Another one to think about is brainstorming. And so when you think of brainstorming, we usually think of brainstorming as any act of figuring out ideas. But we usually use that term brainstorming to describe when a group of people get together and talk about an idea. So brainstorming is really helpful in a few different ways. One, it does help you to identify the details. So kind of like how clustering forces us to think more, in a more focused way about whatever the topic is. Brainstorming helps us pick out details because other people maybe have different experiences or they notice things that we don't notice. It also helps you figure out new directions. If you're ever stuck, if you've ever experienced writer's block, That's a really unhappy place to be. When you experience writer's block, the best thing you can do is to pull in a second person and help get some help from a second person. So that's a good time to pop into the Writing Center and work with one of our tutors, and we can talk through those ideas with you. That's a great way to overcome writer's block. But in this way, you can gather different viewpoints and different experiences about your topic. It's better than going it alone. Sometimes you can figure it out for yourself, but sometimes if you are so focused on on just figuring out for yourself, you can kind of back yourself into a corner or feel like you're kind of up against the wall. So having a second person to help talk through those ideas really helps you make through that progress. So, all right. So brainstorming, that's our second technique that we might use. So let's take a look at another assignment that we've got, and I'll have you guys try this one out. So this assignment is to analyze a text, and this is something you might encounter in like an English 101 class. So it says, select an advertisement from a newspaper or magazine that contains graphics and a written text. Analyze the ad according to the criteria that follow. Graphics, composition, layout, style, scale. Language, style, humor, commands, emotional or sensational terms, overall message. Audience, how does the ad appeal to the audience's financial status, social class, aspirations, desires, etc.? Does it exploit the audience's values or vices in order to sell the product? And argument, what explicit and implicit claims, that should say implicit, does the ad contain? What evidence is offered to support those claims? What assumptions does the ad make? And the instructor asks, as you consider the ways this ad might work to shape values, ideas, and beliefs in our culture, also work to account fully for the rhetoric of the ad you examine. So let's say you get assigned this in an English 101 class. What are some of the terms or words that jump out in this description? Kind of like we did on the first one. Like, what are some really important terms to make sure you focus on in your work?
Language.
Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure I analyze the language of the ad. Good.
The argument, the graphics.
Perfect. Yeah. So notice, so these bullet points are helping me see like the key words to point out, right? Graphics, language, audience, argument. So it looks like we need to include all four of those in the assignment. Good. Anything else?
I would also go, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say shaping values and ideas kind of sticks out, the beliefs and cultures.
Perfect. Yeah. So like, why are we looking at graphics, language, audience, and argument, right? So we're not just looking at maybe like aesthetic. Do I like it or do I not like it? Or is it cool or uncool? But I'm looking at how does this does this work to shape values, ideas, or beliefs in our culture? What kind of influence does it have, whether this is maybe like a social media ad or a newspaper ad or something like that? How does it influence people's thinking about culture? Good. All right. So pulling up those terms. So these are some of the ones that I circled. Yeah, so graphics and written text. So we want to focus on the graphics and the language. We've got graphics, language, audience, and argument. And like you said, shape values, ideas, and beliefs in our culture, and work to account fully for the rhetoric of the ad. So that might be something to pay attention to as well. All right. So let's say this is your assignment, and you choose this ad. So this is a Home Depot ad, and you pick this one out. It's got the pictures it's got the person in her home, and let's see, she's, moving in, it looks like. We've got these kind of green walls, the gray chairs. We've got this language, paint plus primer, perfect coverage, more compliments. We've got this person painting the wall. We got a before and after. So we've got a lot of details, right? Well, so here's our third technique for brainstorming. It's called listing. So remember, we have to come up with graphics, written text, language, audience, argument, shaping values, ideas, and beliefs in the culture, and rhetoric. So one way that we can come up with examples, so what am I going to write about in my actual paper, right? What am I going to actually write about? Well, I'm going to need to write about the details that appear in this ad, the language and the graphics that appear here. So let's take about 3 or 4 minutes. We won't take too long for this, but I want you guys to write up a list of as many items as you can, as many details as you can. They might be specific items that appear in the ad, for example, like photo frames, lamp, baskets, flannel shirt, etc. Or they might be ideas or concepts that appear in the ad. So we might say things like green, like colors, green, gray. We might say concepts like middle class, renovation, things like that. So take about a couple minutes. We'll take like 3-4 minutes. Go ahead and come up with whatever example or whatever items pop up in this ad. And if you get stuck, let's say you write like 5 or 10 things and you get stuck, just go back to the keywords from the assignment sheet and see what you come up with. So we'll take 3 minutes to do that. Okay, everybody get a chance to list some items or list some concepts? All right. Well, let's go ahead and share just a few. Anybody, and you can pick out whichever ones you want, whether it's text or graphics or ideas. Maybe we can kind of go around and everybody share a few. Anybody want to go first?
Or she can.
Go ahead. Marilyn, you want to share a few?
We were supposed to be just getting basically items out of the room and stuff.
Yeah, anything that's going to help you with any of these things. So it could be graphics, written text, language, audience, argument, shapes, values, ideas, and beliefs and culture, etc. Yeah. What jumps out at you for any of those concepts from this ad?
Well, I was looking more at the stuff in the room, like the color, the green walls, the white trim board, the green baskets, the white basket. And I can't tell if that's an old camera on the shelf in between the pictures or not.
Oh yeah, that's a little interesting thing there. I'm not sure what that is either. It kind of looks like a camera lens, or kind of looks like a pencil sharpener, but it's not a pencil sharpener. Yeah, weird.
And then the telling what the ad, the text that tells what the ad's about.
Good. Any words in particular jump out at you?
Well, it looks like it's a paint and primer ad. So
good.
Part of it's covered with our pictures and all that, so you can't see the whole picture. But
okay, yeah. I think you can move the pictures too if you want. Just so you know, if you click and drag them, it'll help. Yeah, I've been doing that over here on my end too, and like dragging them around.
Okay.
All right, but those are some great examples. Yeah, thanks. Callie, did you want to share a few of yours?
Yeah, I've got Home Depot. It's got a Home Depot paint and primer ad. I've got pictures and art because she seems to really like art. I've got sharp angles. There's a lot of sharp angles in the room.
Good.
Plush chairs. Chairs are some kind of, it looks like plush.
Yeah.
I've got green and white containers and baskets. Books. There's a lot of books in there. There's tables, chairs, lamps, paint.
Good.
Not it.
All right, great. So far, I mean, just through a very quick cursory, glance, we've come up with a good 20 things so far. It sounds like just things in a list that we come up with. Natalie, Andrea, did you guys have anything you wanted to share? Yeah.
The thing that popped up is just the before and after the walls, just showing that because if you're just looking at it, it's like, oh, the one's painting is also a wall, but it shows that that's what the room was before they painted. And then after, and so it shows it covered the coverage it had.
Great. Yeah. So we got the before and after. So it's showing kind of, what the room was like before and now after. So it looks like before, I don't know what that room was before, but it had some very interesting paintings on the wall, right? So that maybe suggests like a children's room or something like that. And now after, it looks more like kind of like a den or an office. And like you were saying too, yeah, we've got this paint going on in a very interesting painting pattern. I don't know if that's how people should paint their walls, but it's definitely showing, like you're saying, Andrea, it's really showing the coverage being really strong and thick, right? Just once and one and done type of thing. Natalie, do you have any to share?
Yeah, so what stuck out to me was the power of Home Depot. So then I start looking around, I see, well, confidence, trust, security, clean, perfect, saves time, there's an assured outcome, bright colors, it looks desirable, it's complimentary.
Okay, yeah. So thinking about like this as an advertisement, and again, kind of thinking about how this like, does this shape values, ideas, and beliefs in culture, or does it reinforce, or does it appeal to certain values or beliefs in culture? These might be some interesting concepts to look at. Yeah, these ideas of feeling like it's safe and comfortable, or it's really nice and perfect the first time, right? Perfect coverage. So great. So now let's say, so we've got the details, so everything that you guys have listed and put down, let's say we put this down in a list of things on a sheet of paper. This is great material for us to have handy at our side when we go to start writing our paper, because now we're going to start as we write our paper, we're going to be wrestling with questions of cultural values, cultural beliefs. And we're going to start asking questions about rhetoric, right? About the audience. So who is this advertisement directed at? Is it directed at people of a certain age, of a certain income? Is it maybe appealing to certain genders? Like what's the rhetoric of this ad? What are your thoughts about that? Anybody have just starting with the audience? To whom is this advertisement appealing? Would you say?
People that are fixing up their homes.
Okay, people who are fixing up their homes. Good.
Potential home buyers.
Yeah, so potential home buyers or homeowners. So typically we might think of homeowners or potential home buyers in particular. Might be a certain age group of people, maybe between like 25 and 45, we might think.
Customers.
Say it again.
Customers.
Okay, yeah. So Home Depot customers or potential customers. Good. All right. Let's see. We might also think about the purpose of this ad. What would the purpose of this ad be?
To try to get people to come in and buy products to fix their homes and get them ready for what they, paint and rearrange. I'm not good at putting stuff into words, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So trying to motivate people to feel like they want to change something about their home, right? So they want to renovate, and it's worth the investment. It's worth the cost of whatever renovations they have to do to have this finished product at the end. So if we think about all of that, so it's maybe gearing towards a certain audience, maybe in a certain age group, or even maybe of particular socioeconomic status or genders. If we think of it in terms of its purpose is to convince the audience to make that investment in changing their life or changing their surroundings. What language maybe suggests that? And I'm thinking here, what do you guys think of, thinking of that in mind? What do you think of this phrase, for example, paint plus primer, perfect coverage, more compliments? Does this say anything about cultural values or cultural beliefs, or maybe what's popular in the culture currently? Or if you think about kind of like everyday life and society?
Go ahead. To me, it just says, it saves time. You got your paint and your primer all in one. You're going to be able to get your project done and, not have to fuss with a whole bunch of stuff to do it.
Okay, yeah. So people, we might say, like, in our current cultural, for like cultural values or cultural ideas going on currently, people are really busy. We're multitasking all over the place. And so here we go. Now we can take a look at any of so paint plus primer maybe suggests that. And then we could also look through and see if there's anything else, in the image or in the text that also supports that idea of kind of people being busy. Is there a way that they're appealing to a busy audience, something like that? Callie, what were you going to say?
I also think the more compliments thing, people are always trying to, I guess, to use the word, beautify their homes so that they can show it off for other people, and they come in and say, oh, what a beautiful. And that's one of the major reasons why people renovate their houses.
Okay, so here we have this cultural belief or value, right? So thinking of a home not only as like a personal space or like a family space, but then also a kind of a conspicuous place that other people see and then maybe evaluate you or think positively or negatively based on what your home looks like. So this is maybe a cultural value. And now we might write in our paper about whether that's, a good thing or a bad thing, whether we like that or don't like that, but we can tie that to the ad by maybe pointing out, pointing directly to that language, right? The more compliments. And then we might also point to some of the examples of the things that you all listed. Are there certain items in this screen that you put on your list that maybe people would compliment, or that people would that would be a kind of a conspicuous consumption, like showing off type of thing? What do you think? Anything from your list that would match with that theme?
I think the art, the pictures around the room,
Mm-hmm.
the placement, definitely not that color.
Yeah, good. All right. So we've got the art and the different. It's very. It's maybe designed to kind of to be aesthetically pleasing, right? Very interesting. You had mentioned earlier too about kind of like the soft plush chairs. They look very. They look not only like nice and comfortable, but they look very fancy, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So we can see too, even with like the green color. What do you think about that green color? Is it like a classic color or a trendy color? Would you say?
The wall, are you talking about?
Yeah.
I feel like the reason the color wall isn't like too trendy, but I feel like the reason they chose it is because it has like a very wide range of people. You could do a lot with that kind of background,
Okay.
and like it doesn't section out just one kind of people.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So there's a lot that maybe can do with that. It kind of makes an interesting contrast with the white and the black, right? So that maybe so again, this is all how you might kind of tie these things back into the main idea of the assignment, right? Shaping values, ideas, and beliefs in culture, or this idea of the rhetoric, the argument, the audience, the purpose of the ad, etc. And it's easier to do this when you've got your list of things kind of mapped out like that. So in that way, this helps you move past the surface of the ad. So the first time we look at this ad, we might only notice like the words right here, the paint and primer, perfect coverage, more compliments. And then we might only notice, a few of the things in the background, maybe the person putting books away, the chairs, the white trim, and that might kind of be the end of it. But as we spend more time working on our list, trying to pull out more ideas, we can move past the surface and notice things that we wouldn't necessarily have noticed the first time. So, okay, so at this point, I'm going to go back to our group sessions. Let me pull this up here. Okay, so I want to take a moment because you all have an assignment that you're working on right now, and it may be for different classes, but I want to take a moment. Let's take about maybe 5 minutes, and on your own, let's come up with either, you can use either clustering, or you could use the listing activity, or you could use brainstorming. We could have a conversation. What would be a good... Which one of those, depending on where you're at with your project and what the assignment is, which one of those do you think might be a good brainstorming technique for you? Before we jump into that, do you want to share like which of those three might be a good technique for your situation?
I think the narrative that we have to write for English 95 is about our experience with this.
I'm confused on the assignment myself, so I'm not. That's.
Good. Okay. Well, it's good to be aware of that, because that might be too. So kind of like we were saying earlier, right? We want to like read the assignment sheet, pick out the main details, make sure we understand it before we dive into brainstorming, because you can do all the brainstorming in the world, and then if you find out you're supposed to be doing something else, it's kind of extra effort that you threw in that may not pay off in the long run. So it might be good, because I know 3 of you have the same assignment you're working with right now. It might be good to take a moment just to read through the assignment before we do this brainstorming activity. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Would anybody, I don't know, Marilyn or Callie or Andrea, if you have the assignment pulled up in Canvas, if you could share your screen, we could all maybe take a look at it together. Okay, great. All right. So let's read through this together. So post a personal narrative that has significance to you. Please write briefly who your audience would be for this story. Be sure to give your story a title. A good short story for this will likely be focused on events that happen over a few days, a single day, or even less time. Telling a story of months or years in a short space will result in very general writing. So, for example, a story about your first day of college, or even an episode that happened on that first day, would work very well for this assignment. A story of your whole life would likely be too broad for this assignment. Okay, so let's pause there. So, just like we did a moment ago, let's pick out some words from that explanation, words that seem really significant for describing this assignment, or for doing this assignment. What jumps out at you?
The focus on events that's happened over a few days or a single day.
Yes. So we're looking at maybe like a singular event or a single thing that happened rather than kind of like a broad passage of time.
So for instance, like the birth of my first child.
Yeah. So if you were describing like that process or that day or that trip to the hospital type of thing, yes. Okay. That'd be a good example of that. And so this is something that we could maybe spend some time. You could do either clustering or maybe brainstorming. So that might be one thing that comes to mind. But sometimes if we just pick the first thing that comes to mind, we might like think better of it later on. So it might be good to have to like before we jump into a decision, like to consider the broad range of options. So that's something we could do at this point for it. Let's see.
Audience, like.
Yeah. So So audience is an important part of this assignment too, right? It says, please write briefly who your audience would be for this story. So depending on who the audience is, you may, you may write about one topic or choose not to write about that topic, depending on the audience or how much detail you want to go into. That's good. So let's look at part 2 here, because it looks like we've got a little bit more detail, or a little more kind of like insight into the goals of this assignment through these questions. And this is something you're going to respond to with your peers, but just think your peers are going to respond to this on your assignment. So this is something to pay attention to in the drafting, and maybe even before we get started drafting during the brainstorming period. So describe how the story addresses a specific audience's needs. So if you're envisioning your audience, think also like, what does the audience need? How will your story benefit the needs of a particular audience? Does the story feel like it has been written about a limited enough event to allow for specific details? Okay, so again, we got that focus on specific details, not making a general story. Point to spots in the story where people or events are really clearly described. So we're looking for clear description, okay? Point to a spot in the story where more dialogue or more description would have helped the reader to better follow the story. What is the significance or meaning of the story? What does the writer seem to be using this story to convey to the reader? So kind of like with that first question, we're meeting the needs of the audience. We've got some purpose to telling this story. There's a point or a main idea going on through this story. It's not just like a journal entry of like random information, but it's got a focus to it. So let's take a moment, and maybe I think this might be a good time to do some clustering. If everybody wants to maybe Because remember, clustering, we're helping to focus our ideas, take a broad idea, and then make it more focused. So I could pick a broad period of time. Let's say, for example, maybe first week of the quarter. And I could make that what appears in the center of my cluster. So I might put, okay, first week of the quarter in the center. And then let's branch off and see if you can take your event and make it into smaller events. So just piggybacking off your example, Marilyn, you might say, the birth of my child, and have that in the center. And then can you break that down? If the birth of your child is in the center, can you break that down into smaller events? Are there points in the story, or are there maybe mini events within the story that you could use to tell your story in that specific order? Or maybe you don't have to tell in your story, maybe you don't have to tell the entire experience of the birth, but you could focus on the most significant moment or the most significant hour or whatever it is.
Callie, do you know how many words this one's supposed to be? I don't think I've seen anywhere where it really gives a...
1 second, I can hop in there and actually try to see. I don't think he said, but I would imagine that it's about the same as the last one.
So about 200 to 300 words. We got, wow.
So that's a good question. So yeah, if you're thinking 200 to 300 words, I bet if you wrote about the entire experience of the birth in 200 or 300 words, it might be hard to get a lot of detail.
150 to 250 words. It's in that right up the summary part. You probably can't see that. Where the first one you pulled up in the workshop.
Okay.
It's in step 4.
Okay. So we got to describe something in that little...
No, that was for the assignment that we're doing, like that's for just going to the workshop. The short story is probably going to be like our description, which is a page and a half.
I can also email Shiloh and ask him.
Because that one is for just to see what we learned from the workshop and
I'm so lost.
Summarizes.
Okay.
I'm so lost. I thought we were talking about this. The one we're supposed to be doing.
I have no idea what to write about, so
well, I think
it's gonna be hard.
Well, I think that you started on the right track, I think, just by identifying like a single kind of event, right? The birth of a child. And now so I think it's going to depend on, the length of the assignment. I'm going to guess that for this assignment, I'm just going to guess it's going to be maybe like 400 to 500 words, maybe like 3 or 4 paragraphs. Maybe 3 or 4 short paragraphs, but enough to get some good kind of, description out. I think if it was, just 150 or 250 words, it might be, like you said, kind of not enough opportunity to describe in detail. So let's assume we're shooting for like about 500 words, which is around a page and a half. Yeah. So let's go ahead and just take a moment and let's try the clustering. So start with an idea in the center, or start with an event, or a moment or a period of time in the center, and then try to break that down into segments, into portions, and see what you come up with. Let's take about 3 minutes just to work on our own with that, and then afterwards I'll ask you guys to share, if you want, what are some of the things that you came up with. And Natalie, I know you're working on a different assignment, but if you want to take this time too to apply the clustering to your assignment, and then when we come back together, you can share about your assignment and how you approached it with the clustering if you want. So take 3 minutes for that. All right, so it's been about 3 minutes. Everybody get a chance to do some clustering? All right, I'm curious, you can share, what you, share your process, like what did you go through? Did you pick through many different options? Did it help you think of things that you maybe didn't think of at first? Anybody want to share their experience?
I already had mine picked out.
Okay, so you had like an idea, an event picked out. Okay, and so if you write that in the center, and then you can kind of use that clustering to figure out like different Okay, so it looks like you did. So do you want to describe, we can't really read that, but can you describe kind of how it went?
In the middle, I've got health journey, and then I got a little line down that says Crohn's disease, and then another line down that says hospital stays, and then one more that says my stay in Allenmore. So that's what I was going to write about, and then I have one line that goes up that says my life as a mutant.
Life as a mutant, that's cool. That's great. So it sounds like, yeah, you kind of clustered. So the main idea, or like the big picture, maybe actually, Marilyn, could you scroll down to part 2 real quick if you don't mind? I've got your screen up still. Thanks. Yeah. So there was one part where it says oh yeah, at the bottom, what's the significance or meaning of this story? What does the writer seem to be using this story to convey to the reader? And I think that's where you started, Callie, right? You said like your health journey and Crohn's disease. And so you've got this kind of overarching idea here. And so that's what your story is really about, right? But also at the same time, your instructor is saying like, but don't just focus on like this big broad thing. So then you were able to focus on a specific stay in a hospital to convey some ideas of this bigger significance or meaning, and that may also tie in with maybe your audience's needs. Whether who are you envisioning for your audience for that one, Callie?
Anyone who doesn't know what it's like to sit in a hospital for weeks at a time with really boring.
Okay, yeah. And that might be something too, like as you envision your audience, because everyone, I hear what you're saying, like you're envisioning like a general audience, but also like a general audience is difficult to write to because everybody's going to kind of be different and have different needs. If you can, you could do the same clustering type of process with your audience, right? Everyone in the center, and maybe start kind of branching out. Who are different groups of people who might have different needs related to this story, right? So maybe, for example, like family members of who have loved ones with Crohn's disease, or that type, yeah, something like that. Or maybe an audience like healthcare workers who work in hospitals. Maybe if you wrote your story to that audience, you probably include different details than you would include for loved ones with a family member with Crohn's disease, right?
Actually, yeah, probably.
There you go. Yeah. So I think if you did that same clustering thing and helped you pick that, you could use that to help you pick a specific audience too. And I think that you get a more meaningful experience out of that writing that way. That's really cool. Awesome. Marilyn or Andrea, do you guys want to share or Natalie, did you want to share any of your experience?
I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just kind of went back to that day. It's been 23, almost 24 years ago, but I got the birth of Simon and in the middle, and then I got to where I could break it down to the hospital or town.
Mm-hmm.
His heart decelerations and hours of labor I could put in there.
Okay.
And how the emotions of it ultimately leading to a cesarean.
Okay, yeah.
Emotions in cesarean, so.
Okay, yeah. So one thing to think about with this, and as you're writing like a narrative, and you guys may have talked about this in class, how a narrative has kind of like a narrative arc, and it has kind of like a climax, or kind of all the kind of conflict reaches like one point. And it sounds like yours has a very clear like kind of climax there where you made the decision to have a cesarean. Am I hearing that right?
No, they made the decision because of his heart deceleration.
Oh, they made, okay, and were you, just based on what I'm hearing, so were you like kind of lucid and aware of that conversation, or was that something that happened?
They just came in and told me, basically. That's why there was so much emotion about it.
Okay, so as you're telling that story, so I think one thing to maybe think about here is with the description. Yeah, so as you're writing your story, and this is just kind of some feedback, just kind of you might focus on kind of like like you're saying, you're having a really like kind of emotional reaction to that information, and there's probably like a big waiting period before that. So yeah, kind of describing both that thought process and the things going through your mind, along with kind of like the physical environment that you're in as you're waiting for that answer. That sounds like a great, very focused narrative to describe. Marilyn, who were you envisioning for your audience, or do you have a specific audience that you're envisioning?
Not really. I don't really have anybody that I envision as an audience.
Sure. Well, I'll say the same thing I said to Callie. Like, you might think about doing a cluster just for that. Kind of put in the center, kind of like Callie said, like everyone, and then just kind of think who are the different groups of people who might respond. Especially respond to that story. It might be pregnant women. It might be people who have already had a birth. It might be maybe either young adults or teenagers, or people who are you mentioned that this was 24 years ago, so your child's in their 20s. Maybe you're writing to an audience of around that age who are maybe who are kind of like maybe not having kids of their own yet necessarily, but maybe but they're old enough to kind of appreciate the story in that aspect. So depending on which one of those audience you chose, you'd probably tell the story a little bit differently, do you think?
Probably, yeah.
Because each one of those...
You wouldn't want to tell a pregnant mother that story and scare the out of her before she goes into labor.
Right, yeah, exactly. So you might... So if your audience was like pregnant women who are expecting, then you might be relaying a little bit more confidence or assuredness throughout that story, as opposed to maybe if you were relaying it for a different, just a general audience, or for maybe people who are not expecting. Then you might maybe heighten the drama a little bit, or share a little bit more of the fears or something like that. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so that might be a good step to do too, to envision the audience in that way. All right, Natalie or Andrea, did you want to share anything about the clustering?
Sure. So my assignment is I'm in the leadership class with Dr. Rux, and we needed to pick a leader who pick a quote that kind of we can align with, and a leader that we feel shares values that we have. Mine, I chose Gifford Pinchot, one of the founding fathers of forestry, and so he's my center dude, right? He's the who I'm writing about. So I clustered off of there, about how he promotes forests and parks, what his agendas are, his ideas on wildlife conservation, saving the environment. Where do my morals and beliefs align with his? What are some of our aspirations that might be similar or different? That's where I'm at with that.
Okay, that sounds really cool. And what I think is interesting here is I think you're showing like another way that we can use the clustering. So for this narrative one, right, we were kind of like picking out different events or using it to kind of like whittle down or narrow our focus. And it sounds like, and I'm not sure how you'll end up using yours, but it sounds kind of like maybe you've identified maybe like different subsections of your paper.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. That's nice. It's a nice like visual way to kind of mess with those ideas. And one thing too, when you've got a situation like that, Natalie, where you're maybe envisioning your whole paper, one thing that can get kind of fun and adventurous with the clusters then is where you can start connecting this bubble to this bubble, and making connections that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have made, and that can be really cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Andrea, did you want to share anything from yours?
I don't really have much.
That's okay. That's all right. Well, I think.
Clustering for me, like I understand how to do it, but whenever I come to do it, I just get a blank mind, and I don't even know what to put in the middle bubble kind of thing. Whenever I come to it, when I've done writing in the past, I've never really done the clustering. I've done more like lists and different things than that, and then I see what I think why and like what I need and what I don't need. But like for clustering for me personally, I just get so like blank minded.
Okay. Well, that's something. I mean, that's something that you could kind of play around with if you wanted to. So, I mean, generally, what you want to put in the center is going to be something that's like a big concept or a big idea, so that you can then go and like break it down into ideas. So, kind of like Marilyn and Callie and Natalie did. But I think the next step that we can do, and this is what I would suggest for everybody, what our next step could be, is to then do a list. So, for example, and this applies to all of you guys who are doing the narrative essay, what kinds of details do you think you're supposed to include in a narrative essay, right? The listing is for picking out details, like we did for the Home Depot ad. What types of details make a good narrative essay, would you say? Let me ask you this: what pulls a reader into a story? Is it talking about kind of like what's going through my mind and how I feel about something? Is it descriptions of things going on in the real world, like sights, sounds, taste, touch, and smell?
Yeah, I think it is. It's really it's really explaining your point of view and making sure you don't give away things that you don't know at the time, I think.
Okay, good. So one thing that makes a good narrative sometimes is to withhold some information until the right moment. Yeah. So that your reader kind of comes upon it the way that you did in real life, right? Kind of stumbles upon it or has it happen to them, as opposed to being like warned in the first sentence, like, here's what's going to happen in this story. And then when it ends up happening, it's not a surprise or anything like that. So that's good. So that's something to maybe keep in mind as you go through. You might focus on what are called sensory details. So sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, and motion. These are the types of descriptions of specific events that really help bring an event to life for your audience or for your reader. So as you're describing, the experience in the hospital room, for Marilyn and Callie, you both had ones describing like experiences in a medical center, right? So you might focus on describing, what does that feel like? What's the temperature of the room? What are your hands touching? Are you touching the sheets in the bed? Are you touching like a cold handrail? Are you holding a cup of water or a tray with some pills on it? Like what you can describe those sensory experiences, sights, sounds, tastes, touches, and smells. That's going to make your story come to life for your reader.
Yeah, like the smell of saline, or the compression socks they stick on your legs, or the floor that they try to mop that ends up being sticky.
Yeah. So as a general rule for any writing, not just for narrative writing, but as a general rule, you should have more specific details and less like big, broad ideas. So you might use a lot of sensory details or specific details to make one kind of broad statement or one big idea. Use a lot of details to reinforce those. So, for example, Marilyn, if your story, you were describing your fear, right, in that moment of uncertainty, like what result are they going to come back with? And you want to emphasize that, you could spend a lot of time just on that one emotion, that one concept. Spend a lot of details, like incorporate a lot of physical details, sight, sound, senses that heighten the feeling of uncertainty or discomfort or fear, so that when we get to that result, then it really impacts the reader very strongly because they've been experiencing those physical details with you. So I point all that out because now we're going to take a moment just to do some listing. And so a good technique for the listing, or a good reason to do that listing technique, remember, is to collect a lot of specifics, collect a lot of detailed information. So I want you to maybe at the top of your page, so start a new sheet of paper, and at the top of your page, I want you to write the following words: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, motion. sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, motion. And now, Natalie, for you, this is going to be a little different because you're on a different assignment. But for you guys who are working on the narrative assignment, so you'll write at the top of the page those words, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, motion. And the reason you're writing them at the top of the page is so as you start working on your list and you run out of ideas, you jump right back up to the top of the page, and that's going to help trigger some new ideas. So that's kind of like your touchstone for doing this next part of the task. So I'm going to give everybody just 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, because we're listing now, and try to list as many sights, sounds, tastes, touches, smells, or motions as you can from the experience that you're calling on. So I'll give 4 minutes for that. In 4 minutes, try to go for 20. See if you can get a list of 20 items in 4 minutes. Go ahead. And I'll say for Natalie, for yours, I don't know if you have an idea what you're going to be listing. It may be like ideas or concepts from forestry or ideas from Pinchot's kind of theories or what he's talked about. Yeah. All right, 4 minutes for that. Okay, I'm curious, how many did you guys get listed? Anybody get more than 10? Yeah? Great.
I got 16.
16? Cool.
I don't know how many I got.
It sounds like the listing got some good details written out. Very good. All right. So you can use these then. I mean, use these as kind of like a material bank that then you can draw from as you start writing. So then as you're writing your essay and you start typing out some details, your mind can go in one direction. It can send you, off in one direction. And sometimes you can forget about details or you can overlook stuff that is important to include. And that's where having that list handy that you've written out all those details is going to help you to tie those things back in or to help you stay on track and stay focused so that you don't end up so, for example, for something like a narrative, you would want to provide a lot of, some clear descriptions, right? Like the instructor says here, people or events are really clearly described, right? Describe those sights, sound, taste, touch, smell, emotions. And it's very easy to get off track and just describe like maybe how I felt or what I wanted or something like that at the time. So that this list can help you stay on track. Anybody want to share any maybe standout examples, or did the listing maybe help you pinpoint some things that didn't occur to you at first?
I can go if no one else is gonna.
Sure, go ahead, yeah.
I got bright LED lights, patterned curtains. Those things are annoying. I got the sour smell of the hospital. Tubing everywhere. There's a lot of tubing. Stomach pain and dry mouth because they never let you eat or drink anything. Large windows. A lot of windows that you can see out, but you can't go out. Clear plastic around the doors. I was in the quarantine unit, so there was a lot of difference in there.
Okay.
A lot of high-pitched beeping. One of the most hated smells in the world, Jell-O.
Jell-O.
When you spend some time in the hospital, you start to really hate Jell-O.
The smell and the texture, right?
Yes.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Oh.
A lot of wandering around the room. I found myself upside down in chairs a lot.
What a great collection of physical and like kind of physical experiences. And I think that by tying all of those into, a couple of main ideas or one, really strong, significant main idea, wow, you could really bring the reader into that experience. Those were all really fantastic details. Good job. All right. Anybody else like to share?
I can go over my list.
Sure, yeah.
I got heart monitor, plain walls, cross on the wall, a heartbeat, the medical staff commotion, his cry, the taste of saline. I hate that taste. I'm one of those people that can taste it. Soft skin, his hand grabbing my fingers, shivering, his jet black hair, the analog clock, cold gel, sour candy, and cold ice chips.
Oh, great! Those were a lot of really good details. The cold ice chips, my gosh, yeah. The jet black hair, yeah, very very cool. One thing that I thought, and this is something you can do with listing. I wanted to suggest this. Marilyn, you said the commotion among the doctors, and that's definitely like a sound, right? Like a sensory detail. And I'm thinking this is an example where you can make a list within a list. So you could take that sensory detail of the commotion of the doctors and break that out into another list. You know, do you remember any of the things that they said? Do you remember the tone of their voices? Like, did one of them have like a high-pitched voice and one of them have like a rough, gravelly voice? Or, you know, if you could describe that in some detail too, that might be something that brings the reader even more into the moment.
I remember all of it pretty well.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. So I'm just thinking like as you're telling that story, that relaying those additional details about the commotion can really like slow down time and like pull the reader into that experience. That can be a really powerful effect. So then the reader's like really pulled in and they're right there alongside with you. And then when the doctors come in and tell you that you're getting a C-section, they're impacted the same way that you were by that news. Very cool. All right. Natalie, Andrea, anybody want to share?
Sure. So I did baking a pie. I kept it simple, okay?
Oh, nice.
So sight, red, green, appealing, sound, chopping, cutting, slicing, grinding, taste, sweet, caramely, tart, touch, hard, soft, cold, hot, doughy, dry, wet, powdery, smell, fresh apples, sweet baked goods, motion, rolling, kneading, pressing, cutting, mixing.
Very cool. All right. So in an example like this, like I might think about like, so I've got like, that's so many details, right? That's awesome. So I might think about if I have that many details to choose from, I might think about like, okay, who is my audience here? What are their needs? Kind of like the Shiloh, the instructor is kind of asking the students to do here. So what are the audience's needs? How is my audience going to benefit from this story? And then picking the details that are most going to resonate with that, you know, the significance of the meaning of the story for me. Very cool. All right. Andrea, did you want to share?
So the topic I'm doing is just like, so this is my first time away from home, kind of thing. And I moved in here the week before classes started. And so I'm doing the time where like when my mom and my sister and my boyfriend dropped me off, and kind of like the time we were like okay, we're leaving. And so like it was getting darker because we spent pretty much all day up here. And so like I had the sun setting. It was like pouring down rain while we were saying goodbye, kind of thing. I was like, those we live right, or like my house now is right on the main road, so you just the cars rushing by while like we're saying our goodbyes. And the air, like it was like super musky, but where I found like it really smells like city here in Appleby to me because like it isn't as fresh. And so I didn't know how to describe that other than like I don't know how to describe the smell of that exactly. It just doesn't seem fresh. And then like everyone's faces, you can tell like my mom was trying not to cry, my little sister was bawling, kind of thing. And it was just people like we were smiling, trying to like make it like a happy moment, even though it was like I was saying bye.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm thinking that's a great thing to describe. Like what happens to a person's face when they are in that bittersweet type of moment, right? And they want to, you know, and they're maybe sad, but they want to kind of uplift the mood, right? What, like maybe the face is, or maybe the mouth is smiling, but the eyes are sad, or, you know, like those types of, those sensory descriptions.
That was what happening. Like you could tell that they were sad and like, they were like teary-eyed, but they were like, but like they were smiling to try and like make it seeing like everything's good because it's like a new chapter of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. All right. So great job, Marilyn, Callie, Andrea, Natalie. And I know, Natalie, you're not doing this description assignment, but you guys have equipped yourselves now to write a really great narrative comment because you know what the story is and you know what the story means to you. And that's something that you can convey. And you could talk about what it means to you till the cows come home, right? But what your reader really needs to be involved in that story and to have that buy-in to that story is that detail, that description, that sensory description. And that's why your instructor wants you to, create this assignment or to create this narrative and focus so much on the detail. So I think now you're all really well equipped to start putting that down on paper. And what order you put that in, like how you organize that, it's all going to be up to you. And so one thing you can do with your list, you could, one thing that I do sometimes that's kind of fun is take your list and take some scissors and cut it up into little slips. Every detail is on a different slip of paper. Start putting those slips into piles, like put like with like, what goes with each other. And then you've got a bunch of piles, and each one of those piles could become a paragraph, or each one of those piles could become a part of the story. And you could focus on it in whatever way, whatever makes sense based on how you organize that. That's a great way to take something like a list and then organize your, maybe like an outline, or organize your essay around those details. So you might, I guess the point of what I'm saying here is you might have all of your details like appearing in a certain order in your list, but that doesn't mean that's the order that you have to tell them in your story or in your essay. You might write it according to the main ideas. So you could cut them into piles and do that, or you could do this. Sometimes people will do this where you like maybe put a star next to all of the ones that go together, and then put a different shape, put a triangle next to the ones that go together, etc. And then you can put like with like. Sometimes people will draw lines, say like this one goes with this one, and this one goes with this one, or something like that. So you can use whatever techniques work for you, but that list is really kind of getting the main ideas out there. All right. Well, how do you all feel? Do you feel like you're a little more prepared to tackle this assignment now that you spent some time with generating these ideas?
Yeah, I do.
Very
I
cool.
didn't know where I was going to go at all. And like going after this, it kind of helps me to like narrow it down and decide.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Did you still need my screen?
No, I think we're okay now. Thanks. All right. So great. So the other thing I would encourage you to do, which we didn't get a chance to do in our session today, but is to brainstorm, meaning talk with somebody. So if there's somebody in your house who you can, pick their brain for 15 minutes, like that's a kind of a fun thing to talk about, say, here's what I'm thinking about talking about, or, what details would you include if it was your story? Don't tell them anything about what you're planning and just listen to what they have to say. They may tell you something, or they may trigger some ideas that you never would have thought of if it hadn't been for them talking about it. Or you might ask your family member or whoever you're brainstorming with, ask them, I'm going to write a story about blank. What questions would you have for me about that topic? Like, let them ask the question so that then you can kind of use that for generating new ideas. So I would encourage that for your next step before you sit down to start drafting. Do a little brainstorming. Take 10, 15 minutes to talk to somebody. And all of these things that we worked on today, the brainstorming, the listing, the coming up with the clusters, etc., or just having someone to talk through the assignment sheet and figure out the details of it, all of that is stuff that we can help with in the Writing Center. So for any GHC students who want to get some support in that way, Writing Center is a great place to do this brainstorming work, to understand the assignment sheet, and to generate these examples together. So Marilyn, Callie, Natalie, Andrea, thank you all for your participation today. This has been a great workshop, great having the collaboration here, and I hope you all have a great day.
You have a good day.
Thanks.